In this video, I want to take you through the Person app that you have earlier cloned and deployed on AWS Amplify. In this video, I will walk you through the Next.js code behind the APIs that perform the CRUD operations, that is, create, read, update, and delete. I will also show you how to use ThunderClient in Visual Studio Code to work with these APIs and test them. But first, I would recommend you to take a look at Next.js 14 website and read up on the route handlers and the folder structures. Since Next 13, and now we're currently in Next 14, App Router is the way to go. There are some really cool features with the App Router compared to the old Page Router. I'm using App Routers to start with. Therefore, you'll see that there is a folder called the Apps folder. Under the Apps folder, I've created a folder called API and a subfolder called People. You can go through the Next.js 14 documentation to learn more about the folder structures and the app router. In the People's folder, I've created a file called route.ts and a folder called ID with a square bracket. When you call the API, this will be mapped to /API/people. So now, let's look at the implementations of two methods, get and post, in the route.ts file. First method is the get method. Here, you'll see I have created a get function with a request and a response parameter. This get function will be automatically mapped to the get request. In this get request, I use Prisma ORM to return all the data in the persons table. When I get the results, I simply return the JSON body. I'll show you later what that looks like. Now let's have a look at the implementation of the post method through the post function. It accepts the first name, last name, and phone number. For this demonstration, I expect all of the three information to be provided. If any of those fields are missing, I'll send out a 400 response status and a message saying missing required fields. Otherwise, if all of the three data points have been supplied, then I ask Prisma ORM to create a person record with the first name, last name, and the phone number. And then I get a response from Prisma from the database once the database is created. Every time I create a person object in database, Prisma will return me a new object along with the ID created by the database. I simply return this object along with the status code of 202. Otherwise, if there is any error, I return a 500 status code in my response. Now, what I want to do is set up a dynamic route where I want to have a URL that contains an ID. In this case, I have a URL which takes /API/people/1. Therefore, I have created a folder called ID with a square bracket. This follows the Next.js naming convention for dynamic routes. In this folder, I have created a file called route.ts. In the route.ts, I have implemented a number of methods. Let's go to the first one, where I want to show you how I've implemented the get function. In this case, I'm expecting a input parameter called ID, which is the same as the name of my folder. So first thing I do is get the parameter ID from the context. And then ask Prisma ORM to match the database table where the ID is a match in the field and return me the object. And then I do a number of checks. If there is no record found, I respond with a 404. And I also send a response saying no response found. Otherwise, I convert the response into a JSON object and then I return it along with status 2020. Similarly, as part of the CRUD operation, I implemented a put method. The put method is utilized to make updates to the person object. Let's say we want to change the first name or the last name or the phone number. The first thing I do is I get first name, last name, and phone number, and I update the record with a matching ID that comes in from the input parameter. Once again, I am using the Prisma to do this function. And if this is successful, I return the new object along with the values that came from the database. And for whatever reason, if it fails, I send out the 500 error response. Similarly, as part of my CRUD operation, I have also implemented a delete function. First, I get the ID from the input parameter, and then I ask Prisma to find that object in the database, and then if it matches, I go and delete it. Otherwise, I send out a 404 message responding that I cannot find this object. This concludes the CRUD operations using API for the Person app. In this video, I want to show you how to use ThunderClient and explore the APIs that we have just created. Let's go and run our npm run dev and start the server. Give it a few seconds. You can see that my server is now running and it's ready. So now let's go and explore our APIs. If you have installed ThunderClient, you should be able to see this icon that looks like a thunderbolt. Click on ThunderClient. If you haven't done so, then I would suggest check out the earlier videos where I've given instructions of how to do that. Go into the marketplace or search for extensions and then install the ThunderClient. I've created a number of collections. Click on a new request. The first request is to do a GET request. Let's have a look at the GET request. So if I click on GET, you'll see that the method here is GET and the URL is localhost 3000 people. You should be able to see the same. Just make sure you check The port number is 3000, but in your machine, it may be a little bit different. Especially if 3000 is occupied, it might end up in a different port. I'm just going to the URL, http://localhost:3000/API/people. I'm just going to make a GET request, and let's see what happens. When I click on GET request, so far it has returned only one record. In this record, it has one record, ID of number 2, first name Callum, last name is Bert, phone number, as you can see on the list. So let's go and create a new record. So let's create a new record. Let's say I want to create a new record called Callum Jr., the same last name, and a phone number of 000. You can see that this is going to be a post request, and I need to pass a body for post request. And as I've mentioned before in the code, I expect all the 3 records. Let me go and create this and see what happens. When I created this new object, I got a response to 02, which means it means the record was created successfully. And I get a new object back called ID5, and you can see it has reflected the new details. So now if I go back to the previous GET request, you'll see I should now have 2 different records. Yep, that's it. So you can see the first record with an ID of 2 and the second record with an ID of 5. So let's say we want to change the details of one of the records. Let's say we want to change the phone number of Callum Jr. to be the same number as that. Use the put method to do that. Look at the JSON body. What I got to do is pass the ID of number 5, which is the latest record, just to double check that it's number 5. Yep, it's number 5. So let me click on put. So I want to change record number 5. For record number 5, I want to keep the same first name. I want to keep the same last name, but I want to change the phone number to my current mobile phone number, 0422018632. Let me do a send, and let's see what happens. Yep, in this case, you can see that the record was successfully updated for record ID number 5, first name Callum Jr. If I want to change this again, and let's just say I want to call it Callum Senior with a single dot, if I send that, you'll see that the record has been updated to Callum Senior. To be absolutely sure that record is updated, if I go back and get a list of all the records, you'll see that I've got the first record of number 2. It's still the same detail. If I look at the second record, you can see now the second record has Callum Senior and with the latest phone number. Now let's go and delete record number 5. So in order to delete record number 5, there is no body required. Now let's delete record number 5. If I click record number 5, you'll see that the person has been deleted for record number 5. To verify that has indeed worked, what I will do is I will go back to get a list of all the records. If I click on send, you'll see I only have now 1 record in our system. So hopefully I have showed you how CRUD operations work: create, read, update, and delete using ThunderClient.